Welcome to VERSED, the ASCAP podcast. I'm Eric Philbrook. Happy spring, everyone. With Earth Day fast approaching, we are super pumped about the launch of Studio Green at ASCAP, our campaign to build a more sustainable relationship between the music community and Mother Earth. The goal of Studio Green is to harness the passion and creativity of music creators to raise awareness about how changes, both big and small, can make a difference in helping to take care of the environment. As part of our Earth Day celebration, we reached out to a couple of the strongest champions in music who are using their platform to help save the planet. Later on, we talked to independent music entrepreneur Peter Shapiro and how he has made sustainability a core part of his career, creating and owning music venues like Brooklyn Bowl, as well as producing concerts such as 2015's Fare Thee Well, celebrating 50 years of the Grateful Dead, and 2010's Earth Day 40th Anniversary Climate Rally and Concert featuring the Roots on the National Mall. But first, I'm excited to welcome a genuine rock star, James Valentine. Founding member, songwriter, and lead guitarist for one of the biggest bands on the planet, three-time Grammy Award winners Maroon 5. The band has sold more than 135 million albums and has created a steady stream of hit singles, including She Will Be Loved, This Love, Payphone, Moves Like Jagger, Maps, and Sugar. James also serves as an advisory board member for Reverb, the nonprofit environmental advocacy organization made up of music creators and music lovers alike who are working to create a better future for people and the planet through actions on the road, at concerts, and beyond. James and Maroon 5 have worked with Reverb on tour since 2005, and he has joined Reverb on artist expeditions to the rainforests of Guatemala and Peru to raise awareness about the harmful effects of deforestation on people and the environment. Now, here is my conversation with James Valentine. Well, hi, James. Welcome to VERSED, the ASCAP podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have a genuine rock star on this show. I know you're a very busy man these days, so I appreciate you carving out some time for us. So, you've been performing with Maroon 5 since 2001. You've sold more than 135 million albums, making you one of the best-selling bands in the world. You've performed at the Super Bowl, and you've played at the Pyramids in Egypt. And now, Maroon 5 is set to launch its first Las Vegas residency, which is a pretty big deal. That being said, you've had a pretty illustrious career, but I'd like to kick things off by asking you to indulge us with a little bit of your backstory. And how you came to play in this amazing band.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, fourth of five kids, and loved music from a pretty early age. I think the first cassette tape that I bought on my own with my paper out money was In Excess, Kick. Great record.
Awesome.
And, I was bugging my parents forever to get me a guitar. They finally got me a guitar when I was 13 years old. And that was right around the time grunge music hit. And Nirvana, Smells Like Teen Spirit came out the same week that I started playing guitar. So I instantly jumped in, started learning those songs. I loved Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, the whole grunge era. I was a child of the 90s. But that quickly turned into an interest into blues and jazz, and I got pretty heavily into that for a long time. Thought that I maybe just wanted to be an instrumental musician playing jazz, but I kept on getting recruited into rock bands. So long story short, my band from college, which was a group that was called Square, we ended up winning a national Battle of the Bands talent search in 1999. We won $25,000 from the company Ernie Ball, who was sponsoring this talent search, and we used the money to move out to LA to seek fame and fortune, because that's what bands from Nebraska had done previously. We had 311 was from Omaha, and they moved out to LA, and so did Matthew Sweet, who was from Lincoln. So I moved out to LA, and Square was out playing in Los Angeles, and it wasn't too long before some guys in a band called Cars Flowers saw me playing with that group and basically poached me from that band to become what they were called Cars Flowers at the time, but we would soon after change our name to Maroon 5, and that was back in the year 2000, and we've been going ever since.
Wow, that's an incredible story, and you know, and you're still making history. Um, at what point in your development, either as an artist yourself or with the band, did you first really become aware of the connections between music and what you guys did on the road and the whole sustainability movement and how you could do a better job with that as a group?
Yeah. Well, we started thinking about it actually pretty early on because we were lucky to have toured with a band called Guster in our early days. And the guitarist and singer Adam Gardner founded an organization called Reverb that he involved us in pretty early on. That came out of that concern. Adam saw the tours that Guster was doing, and saw a lot of their contemporaries. They were out on tour with like Dave Matthews Band and a lot of other really big artists, and he started to become concerned about the impact that touring could have on the environment. Right. And so he started this organization that we were lucky to be one of the charter members of, Reverb, that would look at ways that we could mitigate some of the damage that touring can cause towards the environment. So Adam and his wife Lauren, they were really instrumental in bringing this to our attention and then helping us to figure out ways that we could address some of these concerns.
Right. Yeah, we're very familiar with Reverb and Adam. I've known Adam since he joined ASCAP all those years ago himself. So yeah, what he's done with the Reverb and what collectively all the artists involved have been able to do is really amazing. One of Reverb's campaigns is the No Bloodwood initiative. Tell us what that is and how this particular campaign resonated with you.
Yeah, the No Bloodwood campaign, it really resonated with me because here we are as musicians, we're trying to bring people together. We're starting to think about how our tours are impacting the environment. But one of the last things that came to my attention was the fact that a lot of the instruments that we were playing on stage were made from these rare woods that were often illegally logged, and that there was just a whole host of problems that this illegal logging industry was creating. And it was largely driven by the demand for a lot of these rare woods. Wow. And so I joined Adam and some other artists to go down to South America a couple times, actually, to visit some of these areas that have been impacted by illegal logging. And I think the easiest way for people to understand it, people are pretty familiar with the concept of blood diamonds, right, and just how the demand for some of these rare minerals, how that branches off into organized crime, and a lot of environmental destruction. And basically you have the same thing going on with a lot of these types of wood, that is causing deforestation. It's actually leading to murder by a lot of these criminal organizations that are going in and decimating these forests. And so these trips that we took one to Guatemala. The Guatemalan trip was actually a little more positive than the trip we took to Peru. In Guatemala, we visited a concession area where local indigenous tribes were in charge of responsibly foresting these areas, and so it was a positive model where it's actually working. And you find that often if you can get the locals involved, they're much better stewards of the forests because they're trying to preserve those forests for future generations. And in Peru, we saw some areas that had actually been clear cut and where there was a lot more of this crime around this whole industry. So it was extremely eye-opening, and so it really led me to want to just spread awareness about these rare woods and the problems that it's creating. So, what we ask people to do is, as consumers, is just to ask where their wood is coming from and to demand ethically sourced woods. In all, it's in furniture, it's in instruments, it's really a big part of our lives. So we just want to increase the demand for that ethically sourced wood.
Yeah, I would imagine that's not the first sort of area of problem that people think about when they think about the environment, and where their wood comes from. That's definitely an eye-opening sort of subject for I think a lot of people. So beyond that specific campaign, I know, as being a charter member of Reverb, Maroon 5 has probably been a little bit ahead of the curve on what's possible as a touring band. So can you talk about what are some of the efforts or some of the practices that Maroon 5 has taken to help foster sort of a sustainability while you're on tour and during shows?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with a lot of these issues, starting small is always good. So what can we change right now? What are the smaller steps that we can take to make a difference? And one of those is around the issue of single-use plastics. So plastic bottles at concerts. Obviously, it's the cheapest, easiest way to keep the audience hydrated. And what we tried to do with Reverb is to encourage water filling stations. They had a program called Rock and Refill, where they encourage people to bring reusable bottles, and to provide enough refill stations so that we could cut down on the use of single-use plastics. And that's something that's available for the fans, but also we try to do backstage, because obviously our whole production, can also create a ton of waste around these plastics. So that's one thing we've done. And Reverb has done a lot just in terms of the putting together groups of volunteers of fans to clean the sites and to gather recycling materials before and after shows. And so that's another great thing that they've been able to do.
What would you say are some of the obstacles that kind of stand in the way of really making a difference? As much as your heart and your mind is in the right place, there's still a lot that you can't really control. What are some of those that would be at the top of your list?
Yeah. Well, obviously touring, it has a pretty negative impact on the environment. So we try to do whatever we can, but we do believe that music is meant to be shared with people together. Right. I think for one of the biggest obstacles, in terms of the Bloodwood initiative, I think there's just been a lack of awareness. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do, is just spread the awareness of some of these issues. And that's another thing that we've been able to do at concerts, through, we have Reverb there to help spread information with some of their booths and different programs that we've done with the fans. So yeah, lack of awareness is one of those huge obstacles.
Right. It seems like artists and bands such as Maroon 5 have really led the charge to help the environment. Why do you think that music creators are so well situated to help in this way?
Well, I think there are a lot of people out there who believe that artists should just shut up and sing, and to those people I say, hey, we're citizens of this world as well, and so we have just as much a right to talk about the issues that we care about, and so we're going to do that. And so when we see something that's happening. We want to spread the awareness about it, and we've got the microphones and we've got the stage, and so we might as well use that to spread some awareness.
Right. What would you say to younger bands? Obviously, you're at a level where, you have a bigger platform and a bigger voice to talk about these things. What would you say to, younger artists about how they can sort of incorporate awareness and these practices into their, career as it develops?
Yeah, well, I guess I would say, find some issues that you're passionate about, because I think that's the place to start. And I think people can hear when you're authentically concerned about something. And I think for us, that Bloodwood initiative, that really resonated with me as a guitarist.
Yeah.
As having some real personal stakes in it. So I say find those issues that you care about, and use your voice.
That's great advice. So just on a final note, as you prepare for your residency in Las Vegas, which starts next month, how will this experience be different, and what are you looking forward to the most about it?
Well, I'm looking forward to this because 20 years on the road, it's been great. I've loved every second of it. Well, most every second of it. But as I get older, the thing that wears on me is the travel. Yeah. So the idea of setting up and being in the same place for 8 weeks, it sounds really great. And not to mention, speaking of environmental impact, it's it's a lot less emissions on the road if you're just set up. I would love to just camp out there for a large portion of the year. So hopefully it goes well. We're really looking forward to it.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on all of your success, all the great work you're doing in terms of the environment, and thanks so much for sharing your experience and your perspective on this as someone who's really been out there on the front lines. It's inspiring, and it's important for people to hear about this stuff. So thanks again, James, for everything.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Peter Shapiro is an independent music entrepreneur and environmental advocate who continues to explore a wide range of passion projects. He has owned and operated renowned venues such as Brooklyn Bowl in New York, Las Vegas, Nashville, and Philadelphia, as well as New York's Capitol Theater and Wetlands Preserve. In addition to producing high-profile concerts, he founded Lock-In, a 4-day music and camping festival in Virginia, as well as Jazz and Colors, an experiential music event held in Central Park and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Peter also serves as publisher of Relics magazine, and in 2019 was named Chairman of Headcount, one of the leading youth voter engagement and participation organizations in America. In 2022, he even published a book, The Music Never Stopped, What Putting on 10,000 Shows Has Taught Me About Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Magic. Here is my conversation with the magic man himself, Peter Shapiro. Welcome, Peter Shapiro, to VERSED, the ASCAP podcast. It's great to have you.
Great to be here, buddy.
You are someone that I've admired for so many years. I usually get to talk to songwriters and musicians, and it's a real treat to actually talk to someone like yourself who is equally as passionate about music and has done so much for the world and the community of music creators and music fans alike. But I'd like to start out by, maybe...
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
What were the forces early in your life that fed this passion for music?
Well, really a force that really just got me into this moment with you is I had one of those sliding doors moments. I mean, I have a specific moment. Most people will talk about, oh, in high school, I went to my room and I, found God by listening to rock and roll. Or I was more a video kid in high school. Ended up then going to film school at Northwestern in Chicago, which led me to going one day in the March of 1993 to a Grateful Dead concert at Rosemont Horizon. And I had sliding doors is the theory that, there's a train, you get to the station, and in one scenario, you just make it while the doors are sliding. You get on the train.
Right.
You get on that train and things happen and your life goes in a certain direction. And then in the other scenario, you get to the station and the doors are closing and they close just before you get there. And you don't get on that train. And your life goes into, you have two different scenarios, A and B.
Right.
And for me, if I hadn't gone to that show, I wasn't a deadhead. I was just a film kid. I was into music, more Jane's Addiction, Lollapalooza in those 90s years, My Bloody Valentine. Wasn't a dead guy, but I had this experience at that show with my head, that, I ended up in the parking lot in a drum circle in a snowstorm, on a school bus.
Yeah.
And the next day I went to the library at Northwestern and I was a film kid and I stayed up through the night and was at door. We talk about in the music business, doors.
Right.
People line up, particularly GA shows, to be first and then run to the rail to be first.
Right.
I was at doors of the library the only time. And by the way, there was no one else there right when they opened it, 9 a.m.
You had no competition.
And no, and I ran in to see what had been done on the Deadhead phenomenon. I'd seen nothing like that. And I was from New York City. And by the way, there's still nothing like it.
Right.
Even the Dead Now or Fish or any band, there's nothing like what was on tour with the Grateful Dead, the kind of circus and these kids 20 years old living in school buses,
right?
Searching something, fun, but also something they weren't getting.
Yeah.
And so I went on the road, after that show and made a film about it. And the owner of Wetlands, Great Rock Club, saw that film. And so my life went from that concert to making that film a few weeks later, living in a van, to taking over Wetlands, to then to everything comes from that moment, really, for me.
So I encountered your world, your community, I would say, at Wetlands, because I lived in that area and I would go to shows there. And when I first walked in there, I felt that vibe, that sense of, oh, this is pretty cool. There's something here that's more than just a music club. There was an added level or layer of, of love and just sort of respect for musicians. What was the mission of Wetlands? I mean, obviously there was an environmental message involved with that club.
Yeah, the idea was, well, first of all, we had to work harder to give people a good time, because it was not built as a live music venue. Oh. It was built as a hang for actually environmental activists. This is pre-internet.
Okay.
It opened in 1989. There was no meetup.org. There were no message boards. So if we were Rainforest Action Network or Amnesty International, and who usually gets involved in these kinds of movements and drives, issue-oriented things, young people.
Right.
Well, where do you get young people? Now you get them on the internet, right? But before there was the internet, you want to go get a meeting for rainforest protection at the school? Do we want to go to the library? Or do we want to meet up at the rock club before the show?
Right.
The rock, so that was the idea. Larry Block, who created Wetlands, I took it over in the basement. We would have meetings before the shows. And then upstairs would put information out, good old pieces of paper before the internet, pamphlets about various issues that were environmentally oriented and social justice oriented. And you could get involved, you could sign petitions there. And so that was really the idea of Wetlands. And it was started to be more that than a live music venue.
Right.
So the sight lines, when we were sold out, like 20-30% of the crowd couldn't really see the stage.
Right.
So they would go to the bar or they would go downstairs. But you know what it led to? Working on the vibe. Like you could hear the show everywhere.
Right.
But, so to make sure people loved the venue, you had to have everything we did had to be a little bit better than like Bowery Ballroom, where in New York is a perfect venue where everyone can see.
Right.
They didn't. So we had to work harder, and you met people that way. Like you would hang out in the basement. You weren't, the floor below the live. You could hear it playing in the speakers, and you would hang out. I meet a lot of people. Like I met my wife or my husband at Wetlands.
Right. Right.
And that's because they were in the basement or at the bar. You couldn't see at Bowery Ballroom, God bless it, or Irving or other perfect venues like that. you have a great time, but you probably don't meet your wife that way.
Right.
Right. Because you're just standing with your friends watching the show the whole time.
Right. I imagine you met many musicians that have now become lifelong friends during that time too, because it seems like that's another part of your story, is just sort of like this connection with so many different bands, so many artists and musicians.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, I'm where I am, and it's a lot easier now. You know, just doing it so much. I mean, we figured out I did this book, and we figured out I've done more than 10,000 shows. And it's like, when you start, I went to all the conferences. You know what helps? Hanging out with people, being so like doing a show. I was 23, I'm 50 now. So I've been doing it a long time, and I had no family. So I could be there at 1, 2 a.m. after the show, with a round of tequila shots or hang out with the band. And that's how you make friends. And so now fast forward, I've just done it so much with these group of people that there's a level of trust and relationship. I can call an artist directly or a manager directly. Obviously, you go through agents. And I know and when you start, that's the irony of kind of life. It's actually harder earlier on, I think, because, I couldn't get my call returned when I was 24, 25, didn't know anyone. I went to Polestar conference and went to, didn't know anybody. It was scary. Now I go, I know, I don't even, now the other people on the team are going. But when you build those relations, it's anything in life. When you know people and you can speak secondhand, you have past experiences with them, you've been to war together. You've had great moments, tough moments.
Right.
By the way, this thing that I do, putting on shows, I would say it never gets easy.
Right.
It gets easier with experience because I've been through things, but because the details matter when putting on a live show, not just the sound and lights, but the bathrooms and the box office and the marketing and the PR, everything has to be done right. The on sale, it all matters. So it's hard. You can't, if the details matter, it's hard. It can't be easy, if all the little things matter.
Right.
So I'm still doing it, and I'm still like dealing with details.
Right.
I just now know how to react to certain things.
You talked about building relationships, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about building Brooklyn Bowl, because I think when that club opened in 2006, it had some details. It had some qualities about
the bowling alley.
Yeah. Well, in addition to the bowling alley, it was LEED certified, which I had never heard of a music venue that was that, on message with the environmental message.
We certainly, one of the things is, so Wetlands did a lot of environmental actions, help spread the word on actions, opportunities for people to get involved. Mm-hmm. in direct actions, and go to board meetings for big companies to encourage them to be more sustainable, more environmentally friendly practices. But our operations didn't always match what we were talking about.
Right.
In terms of integrating recycled goods, how the air conditioning worked, or the cleaning good. It's hard back in the 90s to get cleaning materials that were environmentally friendly and that worked. We had a lot of trouble with it. So I actually started a company with my older brother, Andrew, called Green Order. I swear, to help companies be able to be green easier.
Wow, that's great.
Because it was hard. Internet was just getting going,
Yeah.
Now it's, and so when Wetlands went away after 9/11, and I came up with this idea to build Brooklyn Bowl, right? Which is like, you have great sightlines. Right. We had food. Wetlands had none. We had great, big, tall, high ceiling barn. Wetlands was kind of lower ceiling.
Right.
Anyone could see, but I kept that village element. Different areas that Wetlands had, that basement we talked about. The bar, it was like a small village. That's what a great live music venue is, like a village with different areas. And obviously the bowling thing, and I was a cinema. Remember we talked at the beginning, I think I said I was a film guy. So Brooklyn Bowl, a lot of it is what's enabled by the lanes, by the layout, the geography, the physical geometric shape of the lanes enables you to, your eyes are like 120, 130 feet from the screens, and they're 100 feet wide. So when you run like psychedelic animations or you run the band live performance, it's an amazing visual.
Right.
The bowling enables that. I integrated all these things I wanted to do. And then we said we should integrate what we talk about with the environmental side and how we build it. So that's really how the lead thing, and my brother's, the company I had with him called Green Order, they helped us.
Right.
And it's hard. So you need advice. And we did everything from like the stage, was made with like recycled tires, the types of wood we used, from the right kind of forests and sources,
right,
the right kind of air conditioning. There's a lot. We did no bottled beer. We still don't. Only draft beer, right? Because shipping bottles,
right,
has a lot of footprint in the glass, and then recite, versus if you just do draft, you don't have those bottles.
Right.
We did only beer local. We've come off that a little bit, but when we opened for a number of years, we just had beers from Brooklyn.
Right. That's great.
Brooklyn Brewery, 6 Point, and so we thought about that a lot, as much as we could in everything we did. It's not always easy, and I can't even claim that every venue since has been, sometimes we do a renovation of something or build something, and it's like, that's not but anyone can be smart about how they do things. And
so you've kind of created this space, not only with Brooklyn Bowl, but your other venues, the Capitol Theater. It's really, for a lot of musicians, they just love playing these venues. They love coming back to play your venues and your spaces. Do you feel like a lot of the bands, a lot of the artists are more environmentally conscious than they were when you first started out? Do you feel like this has been like a natural evolution in that world?
Well, I know there's new thing. Yeah, I think so. And sometimes you lose. I mean, I also got very involved now and as chairman for 4 years at Headcount,
right,
about voting, using concerts and music at festivals and venues to get people engaged. So that became like, whoa, we got to save the world first,
Right.
I mean, and obviously saving the world's the environment too. I was very involved in Earth Day and doing live music around Earth Day and the National Mall. I produced the 40th anniversary of Earth Day. And it's like, it can work, putting music and philosophy or music, and that's where rock and roll starts.
Right.
Early CSNY, you know what I mean? And Ohio and Kent State, just with music that meant something, was about revolution or was about counterculture. Just the San Francisco 60s stuff. There was so much ethos in it. There's less so today if you look at the top of the charts.
Right.
And I've tried to do it, and you can always do more. It's almost overwhelming to think about, but it's been cool to see music. There's little things. You'll see Jack Johnson at amphitheater shows. Those recycled cups you're seeing more and more.
Right.
And I think certain bands are trying to be smart, but there's no doubt that touring, especially large format touring, where if you're playing an amphitheater, playing an arena, you got 4 buses for the band, you got 6 trucks, and the carbon footprint, you're lugging all this equipment, you're flying around. There's a lot of carbon I love doing runs at the Capitol Theater, 4 nights, 6 nights, and we're like, hey, no buses, but then people got to travel to get to the show, from further away.
Right.
And that's one thing about live music. And sometimes people come in and try to position the meta stuff, the AI stuff is like green, but it's like, we need the magic of live experience in this world. Like, the Zoom's nice, but there's nothing like being in person.
Absolutely.
And that's going to have some carbon footprint, and we just got to be as smart as we can be.
Right.
Everyone's, shut the lights off. The bottled beer, draft beer thing is a big one. Staying local is a big one. The types of fixtures you use. These are all things any venue can do. And I think there are practices, that any touring band can integrate just to be as smart as they can be.
Right.
Do your best. This stuff matters. Do your best, because some bands, have limited budgets. We all have a budget, and you can't do everything. Some of it's just not practical. Some is. Right. Maybe you don't need a bigger band, doesn't need to tour with their whole sound system. They can use the house system. because bringing the extra sound system is a lot. Maybe you don't need all the extra lights. You can use the house lights as much as, but that's real footprint stuff.
As someone who has devoted most of your life to creating these experiences, these platforms for music creators to thrive, what motivates you more than anything else these days?
Just, I'm always trying to think of what's next, what's new, like what can I create? I don't really sit here like, oh, I did this and this, it just fades pretty quickly for me. I mean, it was amazing, but actually it just like a great show lasts for a few days where you have that glow from the show and that feeling. But 2-3 days later, 3-4 for me, like I'm ready for another one.
Right.
I start jonesing for it. And then I, during the day, I get tired of just dealing, like we talked about, the details. But then when you get to the show, it's the live part's always, it never fades for me. It always has that. It just doesn't fade. It's amazing. I love it.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Eric.
On behalf of ASCAP's 900,000 members, the world is a much better place with you in it, and we appreciate everything you've done for music creators.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Eric.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Appreciate what you're doing. Rock and roll. Keep going, buddy.
ASCAP believes that taking care of the environment is essential to the long-term growth and success of the music industry. And by lessening our impact on the environment, the music industry can have an even greater impact on the world. That's why we launched Studio Green at ASCAP, our campaign to help harness the power of our music creator community to learn about and share simple ways we can protect our planet. Visit ascap.com/Studio Green for more info and to discover 5 ways you can be an eco-conscious creator.
Thanks to everyone who made this episode possible. James Valentine and Peter Shapiro for being our guests, Sarah Feingold and Eitan Rosenblum for editorial support, Tiffany Sims for graphic design, Kate Cordova and Holly Grace Jamili for social media, MXM Tune, Rosaline Scher and Kellen Pomeranz for our theme music, and Benjamin Keynes of Sight Sense Productions for audio and video editing. If you like what you hear on Versed, tell your friends. Comment on our YouTube channel and share the podcast to help spread the word and grow our community. We'll see you next time.